Hi everybody, Dan Stolbarger. Welcome to this week's Middle East update. It's the week of April 16th. And so let's jump right into what in the heck is going on in the Middle East. Let's start with the elections. Yamnia leader, kind of the so-called kingmaker, Naftali Bennett, has said that his party supports the formation of a right-wing government leaning towards Netanyahu, but their hopes is to avoid a fifth round of elections, but he's vacillating back and forth. Bottom line is that I wouldn't hold my breath. I think the only way that there's no fifth election is that if Netanyahu would bow out, and I don't see that happening. So despite all the noise that's going on, I think Israel's looking at a fifth election. The events between Israel and Iran detailed in this update, but pretty simple. Jerusalem appears to be wading deeper and deeper into a water war, a water fight with Tehran in the Red Sea and the Persian Gulf. And just for the record, I don't see the U.S. running to give aid and assistance. More and more, I'm seeing Israel being isolated, and we know when it comes to the end of days that Israel will stand alone. I just wonder if we're starting to see that materializing before our eyes as the Biden administration sort of draws back from all the commitments of Trump. I just came across my message board here that this weekend in Israel, they're no longer requiring masks outdoors. And this week, it was let out, I guess you would say, that Israel's going to allow tour groups for the first time since the pandemic back into Israel starting May 23rd. For us here at Holy Ground, we are longing to get back to the land, and we have a couple of trips this fall. We feel very good with these groups at this particular time. I think we have a couple of them ranging between mid-September and mid-October. If you want more information, go to our website, holygroundexplorations.com. You can see the tours that we do have. And I also want to encourage you that get the PDF PowerPoint that accompanies this presentation, because there's always much more information there than we have time for with the YouTube. In fact, with that being said, I've given sort of an update of what's transpired in the Middle East between Israel and Iran. You can read that for yourself. It's on slide number 4. It's just called Update. But specifically, we'll talk about the highlights or the big news that's taken place. You've heard by now that there was a major issue in the Natanz nuclear facility in Iran. Tehran describes that it was an act of what they call nuclear terrorism. It caused significant damage to the centrifuges and set Iran's uranium enrichment ability back by at least 9 months. It doesn't happen often, but Israel is claiming that, yeah, they're behind it. So this seemed to be an act of the Mossad. And so with that, we're now having that tit for tat. It's ramping up, the cauldron's boiling. And we do know that when the Secretary of Defense came to Israel, the U.S., that is, Lloyd Austin, that all of this happened the day before. It's in a way, Netanyahu is stating there can never be nuclear nukes for Iran. We cannot handle the threat of our annihilation, and we will act So there is, as we've seen, the threat of a first strike from Israel. And so, as I've mentioned before, not really sure where the U.S. stands in our support for Israel in regards to this, because it appears that we're trying to pony up to Iran and reinstituting this nuclear agreement that's just a facade. It's a joke or whatever. So with what took place there, Iran has retaliated, and they've threatened major retaliation. Again, from the foreign minister of Iran, Mohammad Javad Zarif, quote, "We will retaliate for the Natanz attack on our soil." And again, we've talked about it. You can read more about what took place. Apparently, they had an explosive device that was smuggled into the facility, and it was remotely activated on Sunday, and it was next to the electrical systems. And so now there's a variety of unnamed intelligence sources claiming that it's done this major damage. And of course, the Iranians are saying, no, it's just sort of minor. But the bottom line in all this is that we're looking for what's next. What is going to happen? And we know that we've got this issue with both the Red Sea and the Straits of Hormuz and the Persian Gulf. And recently there was another attack, this time on an Israeli cargo ship. No damage, but the Iranians are raising their hand saying, we did that. I don't think that's the major retaliation. That's the threat was just recently given. So we're going to sit back and we're just going to wait and see what transpires next. Now, the Palestinian elections are coming up. And I've given you a couple things in the PDF on these elections. Keep in mind that this two-state solution has no chance in the world of surviving due to the Hamas charter that has never been, nothing's been ever taken out of it. It talks about the annihilation of Israel. And even in some of the campaign posters that you're seeing, that's slide number 9. It's from the river to the sea. Palestine will be free. There's no West Bank. There's no two-state solution here. It is all intended from the Palestinian side. It's just a matter of time until we drive the Jews out into the sea. How can you have a two-state solution with that? And then we throw the U.S. into all of this. And now it's up to, $300 million of financial support that we are pledging to the Palestinians. The question will be, what about pay for slay? How much of this money that we're giving to the Palestinians will be given out to terrorists as stipends? Remember, our Congress passed what's called the Taylor Force Act, and it's now rising back up to the surface. And that was an American soldier that was killed on the streets of Tel Aviv by a terrorist. And bottom line, because of that, we've, as a nation, saying we cannot support this pay for slay, that this guy that killed Taylor Force is imprisoned and now he's getting a monthly stipend for his actions. The martyrs, or the shaheeds, or whatever these terrorists want to be named, are deemed as heroes among the Palestinians. Not only do they get a stipend, but their families are taken care of. And so of this aid that we're giving, the Taylor Force Act basically states that none of the money that we're giving as aid can be used. How do you think that's going to go over? Well, that's what's taken place. We've pledged, like I said, over $300 million. We've announced plans to resume this financial assistance to the Palestinians, an organization that I value. I get their newsletter daily, honest reporting. They've come out and just basically challenged the fact that this money that we're giving will be used. And so the headlines is Israel is betrayed. Biden administration will resume pay for slay and giving this money to the Palestinians. Again, much different than the Trump administration, obviously. Last up is what I call simply, oh my. So we've had Holocaust Remembrance Day. We've remembered this past week in Israel, Holocaust Remembrance Day, Memorial Day, and remembering victims of terror as well as fallen soldiers. And so all of this is going on in the midst of these celebrations, memorials, I guess you would call them. I've been in Israel before. It's sobering to see the respect. I mean, when the sirens go off on Holocaust Memorial Day, literally, the freeways, everybody pulls over, gets out of their car, and stands at attention as the sirens, with their heads bowed, remembering, because lest we forget, remembering the 6 million. And then the fallen soldiers, victims of terror, same concept, remembering. And so Israel's security forces decided to cut the power supply to the Islamic call of prayer on the Temple Mount during the Memorial Day service. You know, that call to prayer that's 5 times a day. If you've been in Israel, you know what I'm talking about. Well, because they did that, the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas is calling it a hate crime, a racist hate crime, that the Israelis would cut off that PA system that blares it out because of their Memorial Day celebrations. And if you know anything about the Temple Mount situation, you realize that this is always the cauldron that boils and bubbles over, that creates unrest, strife, rioting that's taking place. And so that's what's happening in Israel. How dare they silence our call to worship because of their Memorial Day remembrances. And again, it's long been a flashpoint. Confrontations between Palestinians and Israeli security forces. Occasionally it turns deadly. That's what's taken place this week in Israel. Well, as we close, once again, excited about the opportunity of Israel reopening. Love to have the opportunity to walk the land with you all. Go to our website, get the information, and join us this fall in the land where it all began. Shalom.